Hello, welcome to Trews Round, where we round up Trews.
Here is the sum and substance, folks. Chris Kyle killed bad guys so that good guys could live.
There you go, simple as that. Some of them were children. I mean, it becomes a bit blurred, doesn't it? I suppose in extreme situations, extreme measures are necessary, but one can't help but think that what's really being celebrated here is the ability to say things or to support statements like Chris Kyle's statement, "I hate those damn savages, I couldn't give a flying fuck about Iraqis." Now, normal people that have not been in wars can't ever say that. So even if they think, "I don't give a flying fuck about Iraqis," you can't come out and say that. But Chris Kyle, as a man who's seen frontline action, can say that. And so you can sort of vent your, well, I'd like to say I don't give a flying fuck about Iraqis, vicariously through Chris Kyle.
Well, Chris Kyle is a hero, a real-life American hero.
Let's have a look at some of the comments we've received over the week. First, Esty Perkins. "I don't give a fuck about Iraqs. I hate those Muslims. It makes me want to kill all those towelheads. Living among Muslims, I can understand why there's a large number of Western Muslims becoming radicalised and joining extremist groups. Films like this," she means American Sniper, which we talked about obviously, "and the media in general are fueling Islamophobia. And most non-Muslims don't realise that this is exactly what extremist groups want. This way they can bumper up their support and recruits." Yes, the odd thing is that extremists on both sides have got more in common with each other than the normal people in the middle. It's very odd the way they require each other, the way they perpetuate each other's goals. The way that if sort of, I mean, I know it seems absurd to say it, but if after Charlie Hebdo there was hardly any reporting, just like, oh God, what a horrible murder, and then sort of a serene, thankful and grieving process that took place afterwards, and no marches and no exploitation of it, then it wouldn't advance the idea that there's sectarian opposition and violence, and it perpetuates fear. You're definitely fulfilling their agenda. I kind of agree with what you're saying. Brian O'Sullivan. "Every time a weapon is fired, a corporation makes a profit. It's in the interest of the weapon mongers to keep you in a state of rage at someone. They care not if it's at home, where crime rates are falling, or abroad, where industrialised crime is the rule of the day." Good point. "Arms firms and the government are an interrelated entity. People that work in government go on to work for arms firms. Arms firms probably have relationships with people while they're in government. So the people that are in government now likely have relationships with them. So that's why there's an entrenched and unchangeable relationship. That's why you never get to vote for, well, can't we just spend that £2 billion from Trident on the NHS?
The British government has released its annual arms export report. The report shows that the UK government sold at least £12 billion worth of military equipment to foreign nations, the vast majority of whom are named on the government's own list of countries of concern, which the Foreign Office allege are major violators of human rights.
Ricky Murder. "How can anyone genuinely say, well, the NHS isn't as important as nuclear weapons? Obviously, part of the reason for the NHS falling apart is the massive lack of funding. In 2010, they cut $3 billion from the welfare state. In 2010, Vodafone alone avoided $3 billion in taxes, which they still ain't paid back. And the same thing's happening with the arms industry NHS debate. But it just goes to show that we seem to place more importance on the ability to take life than the ability to give and preserve life." Well, you're called Ricky Murder, but other than that, I agree with everything you've said. Further to the Trident NHS thing, "I've been invited to face shipyard staff working on a Trident replacement programme." Such an emotive argument here from Barrow Labour MP John Woodcock, who in a bid for publicity, which we're supporting him in actually, has sort of said, "Look, Russell Brand says, we shouldn't have the Trident programme, we should instead spend it on NHS. Come down to the shipyard where the people work that will be affected by this." What he's already done there is he's immediately rearranged my argument to, "And as for the shipyard workers that are currently working on Trident, they should be cast on the scrap heap," instead of, "Couldn't we find things for them to do that aren't causing war, a war that we probably wouldn't have anyway?" But let's give John Woodcock the attention he so obviously craves.
Russell, you said that we should abandon the submarine building programme that carries nuclear weapons because some people in BAE make a lot of money.
Right, Woodcock! That wasn't the reason. The reason was, in fact, don't take my reason, even though Michael Burke, the economist, sadly not the newsreader, hello, Michael Burke, good night.
Good evening.
Take up an argument with him. I know he's not famous and won't get you as much attention, Woodcock, but look at his argument. Instead of Trident, we could employ 150,000 new nurses, fully fund the accident and emergency services in hospitals for 40 years, build 1.5 million affordable homes, support all homeless people, provide emergency short-term shelter for all those in need, pay the tuition fees for 4 million students. Reinstate education means allowance. Pay for 10 years of early childhood education. Build 2,000 new primary schools every year. That's too many. Install solar panels in 15 million households. Quadruple current annual budget for renewable energy. Build 100,000 wind turbines, enough to power all households in the UK. Fund thousands of food banks. Insulate 15 million homes. Provide safe water for all. Create 2 million jobs rather than the 7,000 currently sustained by spending on nuclear weapons. I mean, Woodcock is, in every single conceivable way, much better. I mean, the only possible argument for continuing with Trident could be that it's somehow useful. And not even that's true.
Actually, why we should do this is we cannot possibly know, while other countries retain nuclear weapons as they do, we cannot possibly know what the threats that are going to be facing the UK in 20 or 30 or 40 years' time.
In 20, 30, 40 years' time, the weapons that are obsolete now, right, are weapons that were commissioned 20, 30, 40 years ago. And now we're decommissioning them, even though they've got the capacity to wreak destruction and havoc. So it's only an economic argument. It's not a military argument. It's an economic argument. Because in 30, 40 years' time, the stuff you're building now is going to be bloody useless anyway. Not to mention this letter of last resort. Have you heard about the letter of last resort? They're 4 identically worded, handwritten letters written by the Prime Ministers of the United Kingdom, commanding officers of the British ballistic missile submarines. There's 4 of them. They contain orders on what action to take in the event that an enemy nuclear strike has destroyed the British government and killed or incapacitated the Prime Minister. Is it grim that from one of them? Nuclear wars aren't all bad. These are the options. It's like a quiz. Either you can retaliate with nuclear weapons, that's A. B, use your own judgment. Place the submarine under an allied country's command, such as Australia or the US. And then the final option, not retaliate. Right, given that that's one of the options, this is extraordinary. Apparently, Gordon Brown, Tony Blair, John Major and Jim Callaghan stated that they instructed in no circumstances should nuclear weapons against civilian targets be deployed, on the basis that to do so after an attack would be a futile act of vengeance that would wreak unacceptable levels of harm on the civilian population. Finally, they've reached the conclusion that we all sort of know in our heart of hearts. Well, what would be the point anyway? There's no point in just destroying other countries. Yeah, might as well let it go. So the whole process, the whole cycle, ends in a letter where most people go, oh, what's the point? Don't bother anyways. What's the point? Can't we all just hold hands? If everyone's going to get to that point, this whole bloody procedure is a total waste of money. Though it is interesting that Margaret Thatcher isn't on that list.
So if that happens, if we end up in a situation, nightmare scenario where we are experiencing nuclear blackmail, I want us to have more to be able to defend this country than a sharp-witted, eccentric comedian.
His gauge for eccentricities are all wrong. Like, what's more eccentric? Oh, I've got a top knot and a Trews t-shirt. Or, I've annihilated the planet with a nuclear weapon. Oh, you lovable rogue. Look at that look. The planet's destroyed. For generations, people will be hobbly hunchbacks. Yeah, but at least they weren't weirdos and a bit camp. Well, there you go. There's a Trews comments issued in a very sexy neon pop outfit. You can't fail to have noticed. Watch more Trews next week. Subscribe here. Subscribe here.
Is a tool that is abused to fool you and to leave you scared and confused. Trews is like the news. If the news was true, I want some Trews. Let's have some Trews.